Good evening and welcome to the home of facts and absolute honesty. Tonight, as always, we train our focus on current affairs and the stories behind the headlines. I am Julie Masiga. The highlights tonight.
More. 001 0003 003 003.
Journalists are being killed. Not only those, human rights defenders are being killed.
Now, embattled Machakos Governor Dr. Alfred Mutua has today admitted that his county has some serious financial management issues. Mutua, who made the admission at the Public Accounts Committee of the Senate, where he was compelled by court summons to attend the sittings, told senators that Machakos County has some unpaid bills amounting to 400 million shillings. Senators put the governor to task after he had ignored all avenues of accountability to Parliament.
Complaints from the members of the public that they were being conned of their hard-earned monies by cartels pretending to sell them land belonging to East African Cement Company in Mavoko. I wrote to EACC to investigate some leaders, and I have a letter which I've attached asking them to investigate the current MP for Mavoko, Mr. Macau, for engaging in these illegal activities. Sometime last year, I received a letter from a law firm addressed by EACC and NLC, copied to me, alleging that a prominent co-principal in COD had corruptly been allocated land in Mavoko through proxy. I have attached the documents that were sent to EACC. It is the document, I think it is there, it is the document from Degwa and Degwa Associates, saying that Honorable Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka land grabbing an accounted source for wealth.
It is number 5.
Number 5 in the document.
Right, before I start, let me introduce my guests. Right next to me is Wangari Muikia, who is a public finance management specialist with Expertise Limited. Right next to her is Faith Rono, who is a communications specialist. And right next to her is Wangui Mbatia Nyauma, who's a policy advisor. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for being here. So now, Alfred Mutua, darling of the people, governor of governors, seems like he's falling from grace. What's your take on this, Wangari, being a financial advisor, and what he's trying to explain away why he's not paying his debts?
I think Machakos is not the only county who's facing a lot of these challenges in public finance management. If you look at the Controller Budget Report, if you look at the Auditor Office of the Auditor General Report, most all the counties are having financial troubles. So I don't think I think the main reason Dr. Mutua is in the news is because he didn't come at the summons of the Senate.
Yeah.
But I do think the county does have some questions to answer. Mm-hmm. If the amount of pending bills is actually 400 million.
Yeah.
But if you look at the 15-16 Controller Budget Report,
yeah,
pending bills for Nairobi, for example, is 5 billion.
Yeah.
For Kisumu is 4 billion. Mm-hmm. Nakuru is 4 billion and Kisumu is 3 billion.
Yeah.
So 400 million in the scheme of things, it almost seems like Machakos is doing better than other counties.
Well, the Senate did actually say that it's not 400 million, that he's trying to claim it's 2.8 billion, which I'm assuming they must have gotten off of IFMIS or something, Faith.
Exactly. I mean, I think really it's like you mentioned, I think it's an IFMIS problem, it appears, because if you look at Machakos, the reason why Governor Mutua, and that is the reason he gave to the Senate's Public Accounts Committee today, is that he couldn't pay the bills because for some reason there was a problem with the FMIS system. Personally, I actually have an issue with Mutua. You know, whatever amount of money, whether it's 400 million or 2 billion, He had the money. He was supposed to pay the suppliers. And this is a problem that we are experiencing across the country, like Wangari said. Yeah, it's not just in... the issue to do with debt is not just in Machakos. It's across the board.
But does that make it all right? So are we just saying
it doesn't at all, because the reason why we have an economic, downfalls, if you can put it that way, is because suppliers are not being paid. I remember there's a time, and I think it was early this year, that there are some suppliers in Machakos County who actually went on strike, and they were demonstrating, saying, we have provided services to the county, we have spent money, we have gone to the banks, we've borrowed money, and we are not being paid. Clearly it's a big problem.
It is, but then you spoke about IFMIS. Is IFMIS Wangoi becoming the punchline of a very bad joke? Because money is leaking from the system, and everybody says, oh, it was IFMIS. So...
I think, for one, we are letting the governors off too easy. When we start, first of all, by making a statement that everyone's got the problem, it seems to almost suggest that it's okay because it's happening across the board. Now, what Dr. Mutua admitted to really was that he has 422 million shillings worth of bills he cannot pay.
Yes.
It is not possible for you to drag IFMIS into this one. Because if IFMIS was not facilitating payment, all he needed to do was to provide a bank account showing that the monies were available. So that one, I really don't, it doesn't matter how well a spokesperson you've been, it doesn't sell. You cannot say IFMIS. IFMIS is just simply the process of ensuring that there is some level of oversight. And in fact, it is IFMIS that is allowing us, the public, to hear of these issues before it is 10 years down the line. You remember the days of Goldenberg. We needed Munyakei to blow the whistle some 15 years down the line. Now we are hearing it. Now, one of the things that we will be needing to discuss as Kenyans is precisely what do we do with these pending bills when these governors exit.
Yes,
whose bill is it?
Pass on the debt to the next administration.
Absolutely. Yes. The first question we want to ask is, whose bill is it? Does it belong to the county, or is it to be owned by Dr. Mutua? Now, we have a new constitution, and Article 226. It says if money is squandered under your watch, really you will be surcharged. Now, of course, the right thing to do right now, it is to start what the Auditor General is doing, audit everyone, so that by the time we are going to the polls next year, there are people who will be told, say what it is that you've done with this money. Otherwise, skip from running for this office.
True, but you make a good point about whose bill it is. It's the Kenyan People's Bill, and as we head into the next general election, we should be thinking about those issues. But now opposition political parties are said to be in negotiations with the aim of putting together a strong coalition that will unseat Jubilee in August next year. NASA, the National Super Alliance, a brainchild of Amani leader Wycliffe Mudavadi, is yet to take off and even take shape. Across the aisle, Jubilee has adopted an anti-Raila narrative as things come to a head in politics. Is there a chance and need for a third force?
Kila saa hata nchi ikiendelea mbele wajaribu kutuvuta turudi nyuma na siasa ya mgawanyiko.
Rais Uhuru Kenyatta ni ndugu yangu mdogo. Nimwambia ukifanya mazuri nitakusifu. Lakini ukifanya mabaya nitakukosoa. Hii ndio kazi yangu.
Interesting times we're living in, because we're seeing Peter Kenneth and Martha Karua, erstwhile presidential candidates, railing against the establishment, are kind of like back into the fold. And then we find ourselves back again with two big parties on the both sides. But do we need somebody else to give us an alternative? Wangoi, I'll start with you. Do we need someone to give us hope at this point in time?
How is it, Julie, an alternative when it is the same old people who are realigning themselves? I really don't see where the alternative here is. I think it's another avenue, but I don't believe in, for me, in any political alliance that is built around winning for them. I would prefer that there were a political coalition built towards certain issues that are of benefit to the people of Kenya. You can't just, it is okay, you can't just call your friends, because these guys all hang together. When it is 5 years to elections, 6 months, 8 months down the road, you call your friends, you make a big hoo-ha about some coalition, and then we go to election, we vote for you, and then you had absolutely no agenda. This time round, I hope the people of Kenya ask these people who are coming together, NASA them, and ask them, what are you doing for us?
No, but leave alone NASA. What about the Third Way Alliance, Ekura Court?
Which third way? It has never taken off. There has never ever been a third way. It's never taken off.
I think we don't really have a third force, Julie. I mean, I would really I would wish we had a third force, because as the way I look at it personally right now is that we have a government in place, the Jubilee Coalition definitely, that is already going out there to seek votes, you know, whether they have an agenda or not. I personally don't think they have an agenda at all, because first they have failed Kenyans totally in terms of corruption. You know, we're seeing a downward economy, and yeah, so I don't know what they are selling. And then we have a confused opposition. Like I said the last time I was here, they have, you know...
Faith, firebrand as always.
But I think that's the point. I think the point of I'm actually encouraged to see what they're doing, because they need to have a united front. If they bring everybody together, as opposed to this kind of fragmented opposition narrative and wrangles that they have, I think might really have a chance.
We tried this in 2002. We tried it in 2002.
I know,
they had no agenda, and in 3 months' time they were fighting.
I think
LDP
the point
was fighting.
I think the point is, because, you know, you had this thing of the Pentagon and all these things. What they need to do, and I agree with you, is that they need to have a party, not a coalition. So when you have a party, you can actually front different people legitimately through the party mechanism.
So the opposition should do what the Jubilee Party did and collapse
form a party, not a coalition.
But it's so difficult. I think it's so difficult for the CORD now to do that. First, because they have a lot of infighting going on. You know, like
exactly.
they're literally fighting. I mean, I've always said they don't have a figurehead. They don't have a presidential candidate. 8-9 months to the elections.
I think it's implied that for CORD at least, it's implied. I won't say his name, who the leader might be.
But then for the coalition, who is going to be the leader? Because there's Musalia,
let me say,
there's Wetangula, there's all these guys. Who's going to be the leader of this NASA?
Before we get to, I think Kenya, we're really far. I think we're still really far in terms of, like she said, getting to the agenda. And like Julie, the way you wrote, I read your article the other day, voting in power. You know, it's not just about voting in a coalition or, you know, on tribal basis, but looking at what are you bringing to the table.
Yeah.
But we're not yet there.
What are you going to do for
exactly.
me?
I think
down to that.
Kenyans should really figure out and see what is happening as it is now. I was just there was just an update a few minutes ago that inflation has gone up, you know, by about some percent, like about 1%. And for some reason, I think we don't see that. It's not a problem. We are totally fine with, you know.
That's because we say it's 1%. What it really, you know, sometimes when you're communicating to the people, we don't really tell them what that means. When inflation goes up by 1%, it means there will be somebody who will be unable to pay their loan. Exactly. And who has secured that loan with their very house, and that house will be taken. But you see, we are here busy discussing what they are going to get. I think that's part of the problem. We never discuss what we are getting out of this.
That's true.
And I think that's what we need to do now, is for us to start every minute that they come up with this coalition, we find out what we, the voters, need to do.
Very good point. And speaking of hard times, to some serious issues now, even with lower interest rates and assurances from the government that Kenya's economy is growing, lenders are finding themselves tied down to bad debt and non-performing loans. Non-performing loans have risen from 5.7% of the total last year to 8% of the total this year. Sources say that rising unemployment brought on by massive layoffs now means that Kenyans just don't have the money. Meanwhile, the cost of living continues to rise. What is ailing our economy? We were just speaking about this. What is ailing our economy? Because just before we came on, I was reading on Twitter, and somebody tweeted and said that you can't ask Kenyans about whether the government promised a better economy or not, because economy is not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of fact and statistics. So I'll start with you, Wangari, as a financial advisor. Do you think this economy is tanking?
I don't think so. I think that the economy is going through some changes. We have the new governor of the central bank who has put in some very stringent rules. Right. And so some of this, the increase of non-performing loans is actually just a structural issue where he has said, you know, you have to actually identify certain debts or trade agreements that you've come in with other contractors to be classified in the correct way. And they're classified now under non-performing loans. So now you see that number has increased, not because suddenly there's an increase of non-performing loans, just because they've been categorized well. And I think the governor has done this because you need to hold the banks to account. The banks have to put in the proper measures to mitigate for any risk of the running down of non-performing loans. So I think it's kind of a structural change. There've been massive layoffs because the economy is also changing, and so I think that's my take.
But then the same governor of CBK, when banks were transferring between themselves the billions that were looted from NYS, didn't lift a finger to regulate, and now we're regulating to kind of make our economy look better than it is. I think.
Let me say this. Sometimes we forget very quickly. You remember we passed the interest rate, the
laws,
caps. I think for me, this is just a pushback from the bankers. I think they're laying the conversation, the groundwork for a conversation that the economy is being affected by these rates. Let me tell you what I think really happened. They were holding Kenyans ransom with loans and mortgages that were secured at such high rates that having to renegotiate downwards has caused them to start thinking about ways, thinking or seeing how their profit will be downscaled. And they want us to start having a conversation where we are feeling threatened the economy is going to tank. I don't think so. I think the economy is not what have happened in the last 2 months. All of a sudden,
just think about the money in your pocket and how much your shilling can buy as an ordinary mwananchi.
No, but listen to what they're saying. Listen to what they're saying. They're saying owing to massive unemployment. I mean, what happened in the last 2 months? I mean, is there somewhere a crop of Kenyans lost their jobs?
Exactly.
Well, a crop of Kenyans were laid off in the past 2
and
months.
It's very true, Julie. I would just talk about banks. There's a number of banks which actually laid off their employees.
They've been laying off for the last 2 years. For instance, there's a bank that has been sending our jobs to India.
Okay, fine.
Which
that
still
is
means that
totally
we're laying off,
fine.
yes.
Yeah, we're laying off people. About 10,000 people lost their jobs only in 2016. As at now, about 10,000 people.
Yeah.
That has never happened. That has not. We cannot say it happens every year. This is not a joke.
It's a new phenomenon.
It's a serious problem. I mean, we're facing, and I think it's time we tell Kenyans the truth, really, that it's not the fact that people are losing jobs, the fact that government is not paying employees, and the private sector is not borrowing.
Let me ask you a question. Wasn't it odd to you when Ms. Kavura goes to the Parliamentary Accounts Committee and says that she has a business name, not a company, a business name that she acquired the day before, and now she has NYS money that has a backdated check, obviously, that she's going to deposit in a bank. They're doing with loans. There are some people who walk into the bank, they don't do due diligence. If you stick yourself up with those kinds of loans, suffer the consequences. Because what I have read, and what I think even Parliament is not discussing, is how absolutely ungoverned these banks are. If you could open for Kavura that bank account on a business name, and release money the same. She seemed to have done things within days.
Well, the Kafuras of this world obviously have access to money. I'm talking about the ordinary mwananchi Wanjiku on the street, everyday person.
But I still stick to the question of restructuring, because not only is actually the whole system is restructuring. If you see some of the layoffs, some of the big layoffs were the cement companies, because it was cheaper cement coming from abroad, and you could see that the price differential between the imported and the local is quite high. So you quite ask yourself, these margins are really high. Why are they charging us so much? But then by the same token, you really need to protect ourselves from bad trade deals and cheap imports coming into the country.
Right, good point, But let's stick with matters economy, and staying with the issue of economic growth. Nairobi is currently hosting the second high-level meeting on effective development cooperation. My colleague Sharon Momanyi had a chance to speak to the executive director of Oxfam International, Winnie Byanyima, who faulted developed countries for not playing their role in achieving global economic growth. Only 2 OECD countries attended the meeting, and here's a bit of that interview.
You talk about a dilution of both the quality and quantity of development cooperation. And just from an international relations perspective, some of the things that dilute this quality are, varying degrees of national interest. What is the global, perhaps first the political will to have this kind of different levels of engagements and corporations, and then how do countries then overcome that little thing called national interest for cooperation?
Okay, first of all, this development cooperation is part of international solidarity and international cooperation in order to have a safer, more just, more peaceful world. Because we know that problems don't remain within borders.
Right.
When you have extreme levels of inequality, poverty that is biting and deep, the problems that ensue don't stay within borders. They hurt everybody.
Right, before we jump into that, just to quote something that the World Bank said in its Kenya Economic Update report, it's saying that our economy is projected to grow by 5.9% in 2016. This is the World Bank. And it's pegging this on a vibrant services sector, enhanced construction, you've just spoken about cement being outsourced, low inflation, low fuel prices, growing middle class, and rising incomes. Now, if I ask you as Kenyans, are these things that you are seeing to be true in your own personal experience? When you talk about the economy and try to break it down into regulation, does it tally for any of you, or do you still feel like you are suffering on a personal level?
I totally feel like, personally, I'm suffering. I would talk for any other common Mwananchi out there. But I think we need to look at the economic growth, especially in Kenya, at a different angle. You know, look at the various sectors of the economy. Look at industrialization. Look at the banking sector, the service industry, for instance, and what they contribute to the economy as such. But again, I would say that I think we have done much investments, especially in terms of infrastructure. But I think that was really far-fetched. We should have started with quick wins, and probably textile industry, for instance, could create jobs for hundreds and thousands of Kenyans. Yeah, but the infrastructure is in the long term. We will see the gains in the long term. But in the short term, we are not really investing in the short term.
And of course, operating within a global environment. And we've had countless, maybe 10 international conferences this year in 2016, a few of them trade ones, and people have promised billions of dollars, even, not even shillings. And are we seeing any of this affecting our economy? Because if we listen to Winnie, she's not very hopeful that the international community is pulling its weight.
To a great extent, I agree with the World Bank report. If you just look at the level of construction, just drive around the city, just forget about everywhere else, just drive around the city and see the number of buildings coming up. Suddenly, if they say that that economy is being driven by construction, that's certainly, I could say, just based on that.
But people living in those houses, though.
Let me tell you what happens. Sometimes you have to have short-term pain to have long-term benefits. You cannot purport to promise the average Kenyan, the common Mwananchi, wherever he is, that you will change his ability to do business if he doesn't have basic access to power. He doesn't have energy. So when you see government going around and making sure that people are on the grid, it is one way to help. But is it going to be a painful process getting ourselves there? Yes, because when you had a country that had 30% connectivity, you have 70% that is off the grid. When you want to bring everybody into the fold, you must suffer the short-term period. What I think the government is failing to do is to educate members of the public as to the benefit of the large infrastructure projects that they're having, so that the Mwananchi starts planning around them. How will I realize this? Like if I drive around from Nairobi to Mombasa, I observe a lot of SGR railway stops that have absolutely not even a shed next to anywhere near. And I assume that people around that area might not understand what the station means, but it will mean people coming in and out.
True, Wangoi, but in terms of global economy, Wangari, do you think that the international community is pulling their weight? They've promised us the world, and I don't think we've gotten even half of it.
I think we really, honestly, I almost turn it back to ourselves. We really need to pull our socks when it comes to development. We can't always be looking to the international community to do X, Y, Z. We need to make sure our fundamentals are correct. And actually speaking to that, when we look at, when we start saying, our economic, the World Bank says the growth is from 5.9 and is going to go to 6.1, the economy is growing. So, but then we're saying there are massive layoffs. So there's some things that's happening. Even there as an economist, I say the economy is growing, but then there are massive layoffs. So there must be some fundamental restructuring issues that are happening in the country.
Right.
But then I do think that developing countries do have to take up the baton. They need to look at the job, look at the structure, open up new businesses. Maybe they need to get out of this construction, cement and these other things, and go into bigger industries.
By the way, 4.9, a rate of 4.9 is not just
high. We have to interrupt you guys, sorry. We have to take this conversation forward in a totally different direction. Our colleague and friend of the show and panelist Joy Doreen Bira, who was arrested following an altercation involving the Uganda People's Defense Force and the Royal Guard at a palace in Kasese District, Uganda, on Sunday, November 27th, has been released. Joy Doreen confirmed her release on Twitter, saying she had been charged with with abetting terrorism and released on bond. In actual fact, her only crime was being a good journalist and giving an eyewitness account of the violence in Kasese. And Joy is but a face of what is feared to be a shrinking democracy in Uganda.
Cannot have effective development unless citizens participate. Because participation is a principle of development effectiveness, and we measure it through measuring the civil society space. But what we are seeing is that globally, this space is shrinking, democratic space is shrinking. Journalists are under attack. You've mentioned Joy Bira in Kasese. She was arrested and she has now been released. That's not even the worst incident. Journalists are being killed. Not only those, human rights defenders are being killed.
Right, the state of affairs in Uganda not pretty at all. But then I wonder, are we being hypocritical as Kenyans by pointing the finger and saying that this is so horrid and these things happen at home? But starting with Uganda, what do you think of the whole Joy Doreen situation and how it all played out? Wangoi, I'll start with you, I think.
I think, first of all, it's regrettable. In this day and age, it is wrong for anybody to interfere with the freedom of the press to report. But I also think it's outdated. Because this is the era of social media, and it is no longer possible, no matter how big a force you might think you are, it is no longer possible to stop the information from going out. So when a government begins to target individuals, it is the beginning of a spiral downwards that all of us should be concerned about. And we particularly need to express our support for Joy,
yes,
because she did nothing wrong other than do her job right. As I understand it, she's out on bond. We would like for her case to be completely thrown out, because there is no value in causing her to attend court dates for something that's absolutely
baseless,
unnecessary.
And they charged her with abetting terrorism. What she did was actually report on an act of terror, in my opinion. Let me just put that. She was actually showing what was happening and nothing else, and then for them to come down with the full force of the law is a bit kind of, journalists must feel so threatened. Don't you think, Faith?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, during the World Press Freedom Day, I think this year, there was a report that was released by some organization in Washington, and they were just looking at the media environment in Kenya, the media industry, and the freedom of the press. And Uganda was actually mentioned as being in Africa as one of those countries that has their security apparatus, especially being at the center of oppressing, or rather, press freedom. And so I think, yes, Uganda is still a bit far, but I think also in Kenya we have witnessed cases where journalists are harassed, you know. Talking of Joseph Masha, was the late Joseph Masha was a journalist at the Standard, for instance, who was killed, and investigations are still going on. And several other cases. I think the media industry is, unfortunately, it's very sad. And for Joy Doreen, definitely it's so sad. I wish the Kenyan journalists would, for instance, maybe send a petition or something like that to Uganda and just, you know, seek the courts to throw away the charges like
Wangoi said. Wangari, true.
But even this thing of the idea of, well, I think what I understand is that she had been there to her wedding. And as she was in the region, I guess it's in her home region, this happened. And so she was there in a private capacity, but this news event was going on, so she went on to report. So even as I was trying to figure out, do the Geneva Convention rules apply to her? If she's reporting in a state of conflict or in war, is she protected under the Geneva Convention rules? I'm not quite sure how that applies in terms of her being a private citizen or not. But even in spite of that, that sends the chills down my spine. Because even as a private citizen, if she was doing it as a private citizen, am I not allowed to send something on Twitter to tell you what's happening? As press, don't you have the rights to even to disseminate this information? I think it's...
And we are actually living in a digital age, you know, like she said. And everything is on social media, you know, by the minute as it happens. And I saw...
All right, Faith, let me just hold on right there. The director is saying we actually have a clip from Sam Sholei, our CEO, who actually is asking the Ugandan government to actually drop these charges completely and not put Joy Doreen through the legal process, because the charges were not really founded. I think we're rolling the clip now.
Let me take this opportunity to call on the government of Uganda to drop those fake charges against Joy Doreen Bira, to let her practice her journalism without restriction. And I'm asking the journalists here in Kenya to send a petition to the president of Uganda through the embassy here to call on him to stop that kind of thing where professionals are charged for crimes that don't exist. And I hope you journalists can do that. Because I think we must also fight for our space as journalists, not just in Kenya, but across the region.
Right, so Sam Shule bold enough to say those fake charges.
Fake charges. Yes. And you know, I think some of us would have seen this coming. You know, the day that the opponent in the votes started getting hauled into court and being under house arrest without any particular processes, those were signals of things to come. And I think maybe this is the time now we start doing a little bit more in-depth reporting, so that you can now explain to people this is what is likely to happen when we allow somebody to do this and do it without any sanction.
And it also speaks to the power of social media, because she was tweeting, I believe, her reporting was done on Twitter. And there's a similar situation in Ethiopia. There's a state of emergency, and they don't have social media, basically. They only have email. And it makes you think, as journalists, like you're saying, Wangoi, we should have like virtual private networks. We should set up things that would enable us to report in times when really we can't. Wangari, don't you think so?
I think so, but even the way I see it, even in comparison to Ethiopia, like you said, in Ethiopia, if you talk about the government in any negative light, you're likely to be thrown into jail immediately.
So much worse than Uganda there.
Yeah, in Uganda, it's very vibrant. You walk on the street and they're criticizing Museveni and they're criticizing the government. But then, by the same token, they have these things where Kizza Besigye, who is actually the husband to the he's thrown in jail for any small thing that happens, and he's prevented from expressing his right to run for office, etc. So it's really a crazy situation, because on one end it's very vibrant in terms of opposing and talking about Museveni, but when it actually comes down, when the rubber hits the road, when actual people come out, they're jailed and they're sanctioned, and it's
interesting. It's also interesting our relationship with Museveni, because I think it's very different from our relationship with Magufuli.
Yeah.
Because if this happened in Tanzania, there would have been such a backlash, worse than there has been.
Exactly. I mean, I think Museveni has his own way of leadership, but I think he should really just, move on from that, because Magufuli has his own way of leadership as well, and I think he's a bit open-minded, I would say. Not like Museveni. I think Museveni is a bit
old school.
Yeah, old school. Thank you. And I mean, in the digital era, why would you arrest someone for posting something on Twitter? And how many people post things on Twitter? On Twitter, hundreds of people. So because she's a journalist, she's arrested.
We're living in a Donald Trump world,
Thank you. Yeah.
I think maybe a plea to President Museveni on behalf of Joy. Joy is just a young girl who came back home to have her wedding.
Yes, to get married.
She is the least of the troubles the government of Uganda should be dealing with.
Yeah.
There is war going on right now in part of the country. They are the members of the NLA, the Lord's Resistance Army. They've not been able to catch. I think that, with all due respect, President Museveni would be well advised to let this young woman go and start making her home, and perhaps to use the resources he seems to have towards something more appealing.
On that note, Wangoi, let's go to our Twitter poll, and we're asking you, is the government lying to Kenyans when it says that the economy is growing? Is the government lying to Kenyans when it says that the economy is growing? Tweet me at Julie Masiga, at KTN News, #news sources, and we will sample your views as we go along at the end of this program. Right now, we're going for a quick break. Do stay with us. We'll be right back.